I've spent the last 2 years making my dream gaming mouse. It started as a rough idea with some basic shapes and now has evolved into something that I never thought was possible. A fully assembled, complete product. It is finally complete, the ZeroMouse Blade. Let's just go ahead and take a look at the final product, of course, starting with the weight. So out of the box, should land somewhere between 21 and 22 grams. That's with a coating on the shell, screws installed, full-size battery, and dot skates on the bottom. I've said a couple of times I can get this thing lighter if I really tried. Smaller battery, smaller contact points on the shell. Could probably get this down closer to around 16, 17 grams, but that wouldn't necessarily make it a better mouse to use. I think that's very important to note because this whole journey for the ZeroMouse has been about just weight reduction, getting this thing as light as possible. But, along the way, you realize you don't want to sacrifice some things, like the stiffness of the shell, for example, and also the grippiness. Now, it's not just all about the weight. The shape is incredibly important as well. So this has been a big focus for the ZeroMouse. It's not often talked about when it comes to ultra lightweight mice. It's just typically all about the numbers. But yeah, the shape is very, very important. So we have a balanced set of grip points, which forms like a nice even triangle across the center, and it's just a really even pressure across the base of the mouse. You'll also notice that every point of contact on the ZeroMouse is concaved, so that improves the amount of surface area that's captured by your fingertips. I could go on about how this improves control, but yeah, you really feel the difference compared to more round, bubble-shaped mice. Another small detail which makes a big difference are the main triggers. So they're sloped on an angle, so upwards towards your index finger. The reason that this is done is because your wrist is naturally rotated as you're sitting at your desk. You don't have it like flat like this, it kind of internally rotates your shoulder. I mean, just kind of a weird geeky detail. If you see ergonomic mice like the Zowie EC series or the Razer Death Adder mice, for example, they have these sloped triggers as well. I wanted to kind of capture that feeling with the ZeroMouse, and it was a worthwhile change. Now, one of the trademark features of the ZeroMouse is the reverse trigger design, and I'm going to explain why this is kind of the meta when it comes to fingertip grip mice. So with a normal mouse, you've got the triggers attaching as a lever from usually the middle of the mouse, and towards the front, they're really light, at least on most mice, maybe not the super light too, and then towards the back, they're usually really stiff. And it's kind of unfortunate because if you're fingertip gripping, usually holding the mouse towards the back here, you end up with a really stiff feeling click. So with the ZeroMouse, that's kind of the opposite. The further back you click, the lighter the clicks are. And so yeah, for fingertip grip on the ZeroMouse, you still get those really light clicks, where on most mice, it's actually a really stiff feeling. And then finally, there's the coating for the shell. So it's a UV resistant, ultra matte coating, which feels really, really grippy. I'm really interested to hear what people think about this. Of course, coating is really important for a fingertip grip where you have minimal contact with the shell. It's a pretty thin coating, adds about 0.5 gram of weight, but yeah, definitely makes up for it in the amount of extra control that you feel. Now, the first question I usually get when people see this is, dude, how are you meant to hold this and play games with it? It looks like the weirdest, most uncomfortable mouse in the world. So this is a fingertip grip optimized mouse. I believe the guys at Zorn Koenig were the first to do this, but basically the only contact is with your fingertips. It feels a lot better than you might think if you've never tried playing like this before. Compared to other grip styles where you rest your palm on the mouse, with fingertip, you have more mobility and fingertip control. So things like micro adjustments and recoil control now don't require you to move your arm at all. I'm not going to say it's the meta and everyone has to play like this, but for me, playing tracking based games where I'm doing a lot of quick and snappy movements, but then also micro adjustments and just kind of aiming up, down, every direction, it's easily what feels the most comfortable and natural. The other benefit with fingertip is that you can use a much lighter mouse than before. It's basically as close as you can get to aiming with an empty hand. Now, this shell design is not possible with common manufacturing methods, not without compromising the weight reduction efforts and shape optimization. And even then, you need to split it up into around 4 different pieces. At that point, we're removing what makes the ZeroMouse a ZeroMouse. It's always been about optimization. It's about removing every last non-essential gram from the shell. The shell weighs just 8 grams in total and is actually 3D printed all in one single piece. Now I know many people hear 3D printing and think of it as cheap and low quality, but things are changing. Some of the most expensive machines and products in the world use 3D printed parts. If mass versus stiffness is your goal, then 3D printing is ultimately the best choice. We also now have printers which are extremely rapid and use very advanced materials that can produce hundreds of models per day at a quality that rivals injection molding. So this is the previous ZeroMouse. It's printed in a material called nylon PA12. I would have these printed by another company who would print them for me, order in about 1100, go through them, and then ship them out to my customers. The problem is, when you're ordering that many, you start to notice some problems and inconsistencies. So these are printed in a big powdery cake, essentially. It's like a big block. The problem is that big powdery cake cools unevenly. It cools faster on the edges. So if you have prints on the outside, they're going to cool and warp compared to the ones on the inside, especially when you're printing thin objects like this. I was also reaching the limit of how advanced and complex I could make my ZeroMouse shell. Sometimes I would add a little feature, a little detail or cutout, and it just would not hold up with this material. It just either wouldn't be there or it would be broken. But the ZeroMouse is now printed on those. These are Formlabs Form 4Ls, basically the most insane resin printers that you can buy without spending like enterprise level money. They are insane machines, especially for production stuff like this, because the workflow is just so amazing. I did a video on this printer a couple months back. One of them is a review unit, but I ended up buying 2 more. Liquid resin goes in, UV light then hardens the layers, and eventually you get a build plate full of these. So what you have here is the ZeroMouse shell suspended in the support structure. And this support structure is easily the most important thing when it comes to production. I would say as much time as I've spent fine-tuning the ZeroMouse shell, I've spent an equal amount of time, for this unit at least, optimizing this structure. So there are areas of the model which are of a super high priority quality-wise, like the contact points and the actuator. Basically everything that you can see while the mouse is sitting on your desk, I want it to be as smooth as possible with no support contact. But there are areas which are less of a priority quality-wise that you kind of have to sacrifice, like the bottom of the shell. You will still see there some areas where the supports have been removed. There are little scars and seams and stuff like that. I don't want to downplay this or mislead anyone. It is still definitely a 3D printed product. And then finally, the circuit board and the battery, the engine of the ZeroMouse. None of this would be possible without the Falcon module from Finalmouse. Just compared to the Viper V2 internals that were used for the previous ZeroMouse mod kits, we're saving significant weight just on the PCB and battery alone, which at this weight is huge. It's also an incredibly low latency package, can run up to 8000 Hz polling, which is just pure overkill, and you've got a nice lightweight web-based software to work with. Beyond the hardware and the software though, I mean, Finalmouse have been at the forefront of ultralight mice since the beginning, and they haven't stopped. They are absolute fanatics and they're always trying to squeeze out that last drop of performance. This isn't free hardware for me as well. This isn't sponsored. I'm buying these modules in bulk and spending a lot of money to make this happen. But it is a pretty cool feeling being able to piggyback off of all of their hard work and research and experience and being able to run the absolute best out there in the ZeroMouse. Now, when I did my first ZeroMouse mod kit launch video a couple years back, there's something that I said that I remember very distinctly because it's kind of been the driving force behind all of this development. I said that working on this 3D printed ultralight shell, I'd actually grown an appreciation for more refined products. I would put my ZeroMouse next to a Zowie or a Logitech, and the difference was just painful. The ZeroMouse, even back then, don't get me wrong, was still a beast to aim with, but I had a long way to go in terms of quality and refinement. This is why I didn't just keep releasing mod kits, even though people kept asking for them. I can now safely say that the ZeroMouse is in a completely different league compared to before. Switching to resin, having a proper coating, having a dedicated circuit board with the proper standoff positions and sensor position, everything considered from the beginning. It truly destroys any product or prototype that I've made before. Now, let's talk about the price. $169 US is probably a lot more expensive than what most people thought this would be. Initially, I announced the price at $149, but that was back when the shell was nylon, I was outsourcing the prints, and Now switching to resin, things are more expensive. I'm doing all the printing and post-processing and clear coating myself. I also need to pay a very small team now to help me assemble these and pay them adequately. Now, could I have made this closer to $100? Honestly, yeah, probably. I probably could have gone with a much cheaper circuit board from a big factory. I could have also probably injection molded something around that 30 to 35 gram mark, but is that something that I'd personally want to use? Is it something that I'd personally want to put out there in the world? Honestly, no. To be somewhat fair and objective though, I mean, this isn't too different to the pricing that you'll see in this category from other mice. Some of them are around the same price, if not more expensive. Even my previous mod kits would have set you back like $200 if you bought my kit plus the mouse that you needed to assemble it. But if there's something that you can take away from this video, it's not that you should rush out and buy the Zero Mouse. Definitely if this is something that you've been excited for and you have some disposable funds set aside to treat yourself with, then absolutely. I mean, I would love for you to try it. But more than that, I just hope that everyone one day will be able to go through a similar process to this. It doesn't have to be making a product or building a brand, but maybe it's an obsession you have with a sport or mastering an instrument. Just pursuing something that requires a deep level of focus and problem solving, waking up every day, trying to unlock that next level. There is nothing better. There were some days 3D modeling this thing, hours would go past like minutes. I would forget to eat. People would ask me what I was doing on the weekend, and I mean, I didn't even know what day it was. I was just excited that day to wake up and check my 3D print, did the changes I made overnight, fix that issue with the supports or the layers. I know it sounds horrible to some to be so consumed by a single thing, but for me, I feel immense joy when every day I can work towards being better at something and I see the improvement. And for the past 2 years, that has been the Zero Mouse. If you want to pick one up, I'll leave the link down below in the description. If not, then hope you enjoyed the video.